Welcome to another Thursday with ThirdPath webinar. I know I say this every single time, but I am super excited about today's webinar. For those of you who are listening, we talk about how we've been working hard for 20 years to think differently about how we can do work, family, and leadership. And to be honest with you, all of that work that we do is because of something and someone I met over 30 years ago. Her name is Lotte Bailyn, and you're going to hear a little bit from Lotte Bailyn at the start of today's webinar. Then you're going to hear 3 amazing stories that illustrate what she taught us, and then we're going to get her insights about what the future brings for us. Lotte taught us something called the dual agenda. It's the idea that we can think about how to do our work in a way where we also have time for our lives, and most importantly, when we do that, we actually find ways to improve how we work. Some of the stories you're going to hear about today are about how people have applied this on a personal level, but Lotte's original work was actually with a group of people helping a whole team think differently. Lotte, what's a quick memory or takeaway on this journey you've been on helping the world think in very different ways?
Jessica, I think that's right, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing your 3 cases, and I have some questions for each of them.
So to get your eyes and ears and understanding around what this dual agenda is, we're going to start with a story. This actually takes us back about 10 or so years to somebody who you can read about on our website. We refer to him as CJ. He's actually joining us today. And when I heard CJ's story a while ago, I could tell that it was the perfect story to explain the dual agenda because CJ, like many parents, wanted to be a great employee, but he also wanted to be a great parent, in this case, a father who worked 4 days a week. And so when I listened to CJ and heard about how he was working, I said, hey, CJ, we got to capture this story so we can educate people about how they can go from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week and why their organization benefits from this change. So CJ, I'm so glad you're here today, and we're going to start with part 1 of your story. Very quickly, what are some ways you and your organization benefited from the change to go to a 4-day work week many, many moons ago? Welcome, CJ.
Thank you, Jessica. Pleasure to be here. So this started probably 12 years ago or so. Our second child was on their way, and I just realized that my life was getting consumed by work. Hello?
Yep.
So how did the company benefit? I found myself being coming to work Monday mornings not fully recharged, and I realized that just what I needed was more time at home, more time to connect with my family, and if I had that time, then I would be able to come to work more refreshed. So we worked pretty closely with management and established a 4-day working schedule, slightly longer days, but not a full 10-hour day, and that having that extra day off, having the extra day of no commute is really helped me to come to work fully recharged on Monday, and it also helped us look at my schedule and how my time was being used. It helped us to create more productive time, and I think in the end, by offloading some of my tasks to other people as well, just to improve efficiency and communication, all of those were kind of worked through this process, and in the end, everyone benefited as far as I'm concerned.
CJ, I was curious, how many people in your organization knew about this?
As it was being developed?
Or as you were doing it? Was it generally known that you were doing this?
Yes, I worked for a small company. We at the time we were 22 or 23 employees. So yes, everybody knew it at the time.
And did other people pick up on it? Did it affect the company as a whole?
Yes, it took some time, but there was a few years later, another coworker implemented a 4-day work week, and now actually we have 2 or 3 production staff who have gone to a reduced 4-day work week.
Very good.
Yep.
Yes. In fact, and again, our time is going to go by very quickly, but if you read the CJ case study on our website, you'll learn that CJ's manager really advocated for him to help think about this. And as CJ talked about, find some ways to support him around making this change. But what I wanted to get to, and I won't spend much time talking about this, but, now 20 years into this, and I know that, this is the kind of stuff that, Lotte saw a long time ago, is that people learn better skills around how to get their work done. Whole teams can learn better skills around how to get their work done when they're encouraged to think about this dual agenda. And so again, we're never saying to people, hey, work a 4-day work week and do a bad job. We're saying, hey, we can help you think differently about how to get your work done so you have time and energy for your lives, and you will likely find ways to improve how you get your work done. But I want to get to part 2 of CJ's story, which is why CJ is here today. One of the things we've also learned is as you move along in your career, things can get more demanding. And so CJ contacted me probably about 6 or 8 weeks ago, and that's a direct quote from his email, where he's basically talking about that as time has gone on and as his different responsibilities have grown, as the organization has seen him as an extremely competent person, the organization, has given him more and more opportunities to grow and have work become an even more dominant part of his life again. But as you can see from that quote, CJ actually would like to have an opportunity to grow, but also still have time for his life and family. CJ, I know you're just at the beginning of this journey, and so there might not be a whole lot you want to share about where you are in this crossroad, but any insights you feel like you want to share with the audience about the challenge at the crossroad you're at, any insights there?
Yeah. Well, as I say, the team has grown. We're probably I think we're at 36 staff now. So, and the sales have doubled since I started this schedule. So we're busy, and I've just recently kind of opened up to management and been pretty honest about the pressures that I'm feeling and kind of the lifestyle that I want to maintain. And I've been met with a lot of open-minded consideration. So we're definitely stepping up the structure of the organization, and leadership for my department is falling on me. And we've already gone through some leadership training. And on one hand, it's really exciting, but on the other hand, I think I have this assumption that it means I have to work more, but I'm trying to dispel that now. That's the challenge I'm at now. How can I be a leader and not think that I have to work 60 hours a week? Yes.
And that's what we're going to be talking about too, CJ. And those who are listening in, you're going to hear about a resource we have for free available to you about this exact issue. Because if we don't have leaders model these ideas, change is not going to happen, period. End of story. We need to support leaders to model an integrated life too. And so we're going to get to Tanya's story shortly, and you're going to see she's someone who's been thinking about this issue for a long time, and really gotten pretty smart as a leader about these issues. Before we get there, Lotte, you might have one very fast question you want to ask CJ. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on marching us along.
No, go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So one of the problems that we've seen over the last 20 years is, yes, we've invented a new way of doing work where we can encourage people to think about their lives outside of work, alongside their work. But we've also seen a rise in the length of time, especially professional and white collar workers are working. And the scariest fact now, for the first time, overworking pays. There's a really good article by Claire Kane Miller about this. And so there's actually an incentive for families to have one person work ridiculous hours because they will get some ridiculous pay. So there's some challenges that have happened alongside the learning that we've done around the dual agenda that make putting boundaries around work very challenging for families. But over the 20 years, we've also learned that when organizations have everybody overwork and create an environment of chronic overwork, there's a lot of really bad consequences. And if you listen to our January Thursday webinar, you'll hear a lot more about this. This is definitely something that has gotten hidden because remote work, it's harder to see people chronically working. But I can guarantee this past year with the pandemic, we're still facing a problem around chronic overwork. What we learned ultimately was in order for real change to happen, we needed to have people think about flexibility, where and when they work, but we also needed them to think about capacity. How much work could we handle? Or in CJ's case, how can we go from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week and not just try to get the exact same amount of work done? And again, read CJ's case study and you'll see how he's done this. So I mentioned that I was going to introduce you to a wonderful leader. Welcome, Tanya. You've been listening in, and we've had a wonderful time this past year getting to know each other and how you actually have been an integrated leader as long as I've been speaking to you, because you've been someone who's done work, but also you've combined it with moving ahead and you're earning different advanced degrees, and you learned some great patterns around this, for example, keeping Wednesday mornings to yourself for quiet thinking work and for school work. Tanya, what else have you learned about being an integrated leader? What are some of the opportunities around that, and what are some of the challenges?
Hi, everybody. Jessica, thanks for having me. One of the things that I have learned about being an integrated leader is placing the big rocks first. And that's like the Stephen Covey concept of like managing your big rocks. And so it took me a while as a working professional to figure out that if I didn't control my time, others would control my time for me. So in the past 2 to 3 years, I've created a system that works well for me that allows me to disconnect from work in the evenings and on the weekends. So I set up my day so that between 7 and 9 every morning, I use it to work on projects. So as Jessica mentioned, I just completed my 5th degree, and that required a lot of reading, a lot of studying. And at the end of my workday, I just didn't have the energy to do it. So I did that reading and studying in the morning. When there are work projects that I need to tackle, I do them between 7 and 9 in the morning. That's when I look at my email. That's when I just prepare to start my day. After I go through that process, I always start off with a morning meditation before I enter the workday. After my meditation, I have my first call. Normally, my first call of the day is around 10, and then it goes up until 6 o'clock. So the day is packed. There aren't a lot of breaks or a lot of time to do any of the things that I had spent the morning on. So I had to create that time. The other thing that I do is every Wednesday, I block off a good chunk of time, around 2 to 3 hours, where I can just have some extended work time to get things done, tackle major projects, read reports, plan for upcoming meetings. That block, I've worked with my executive assistant to make sure that we protect it as much as possible. Sometimes we can't, but she knows that that's a last resort to use the time in that block. Because I've been able to build these systems, once I log off in the evening, I don't check my email. I don't check my email on the weekends. My supervisor, all of my direct reports, all of my colleagues know this, and they know if they need me and it's urgent, they should text me. I don't get a lot of texts in the evening because that requires people to think, is this really urgent or can it wait until the next day? So those are some of the ways that I have tried to create a balance for myself.
Wow. So I'm going to share some more wonderful things about Tanya, but again, everybody who's listening in, maybe this is the first year you've experienced completely fully remote working. By the way, Tanya's been an expert on remote working forever. And did you hear her talk about how she can turn off work in the evenings and turn off work on the weekends? Because that's a problem I've heard a lot of people talk about this year with remote work, is that they don't know how to turn it off. And so you can learn these skills. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Lottie, you might have a question for Tanya before I show one more slide.
Yeah, I was curious whether you're doing this changed at all the way that people on your team worked.
Yes, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is when I initially decided that I was going to turn off the email notification on my phone and that I wasn't going to check email in the evenings. I was met with surprise. And now I hear more people saying that they do that because they realize that we don't have to have our emails dinging on our phones all day. And so that's the biggest change that I've seen. I've also seen people try to start blocking off time as well during the workday, at least one time a week to get major projects done.
Good. Sounds
Yeah. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And again, I love the questions you're asking, Lottie, because this is the truth that we're seeing, is that when someone models these things, especially when a leader models this and is very transparent about it, it gives everybody else permission to think smarter and work smarter as well. Well, how did Tanya get so smart? I do not claim it was just this process, but she was a participant in something that we're going to be starting a new group this March, our OMG, Overwhelm Mitigation Groups. And the whole idea about these groups is that over a series of 12 calls, we can help you learn some of these skills, this routine quiet time. One of the things that CJ learned was if he systematized things, he could delegate them better. People can better manage the seasons of their work. So you've been on a journey, Tanya, thinking ahead about your life around how to keep on reaching for your goals. Did the OMG group help you think a little bit about your work and life goals? And if you don't mind sharing a few of those insights.
Yes, I found the OMG group really helpful in holding me accountable because even though I have these systems in place, it's hard to let things slide, especially when the pandemic hit and work became extra busy. Having that OMG group call every month to hear how other people were adjusting and to recognize that I didn't have to change my structure in order to continue to be successful in my work. So that was one of the things that was really helpful. The other thing was that we talked about asking for what you need. So asking for support, naming when things aren't working, or naming when you need to change or have someone else assist you. I'm not great at doing that, but with the OMG group, it really helped me think about the importance of it. And the third thing was taking vacations. So I talked about setting aside my time, but it's work time. And I am not the best at scheduling my vacations, using all of my vacation time. And one of the things that we talked about was go ahead and putting those on the calendar as well. So I've started to get better, not great, but better at doing that also.
And it's a process, isn't it, Tanya? I mean, here I am so many years into trying to prioritize work and life. And I've failed a lot more times than I've succeeded. But each time I fail, I learn a little bit more. Wonderful. There might be one last thing you want to say, Tanya, before we share one more case study, or Lottie, there might be one last question you want to ask Tanya.
No, I'm okay.
Wonderful. All right. Hey, folks, you're listening in again. The dual agenda, the idea that you can say, I want to be successful at work and I want time and energy for life. And when I do this, I'll probably find ways to improve both. And I hope you're starting to get the picture that this is possible. All right. I am so pleased to have Beth join us too. When I got to know Beth, there was just so much joy in learning about how creative she was at her workplace. She's someone who helped me come up with an idea I call pockets of change, because she was someone who was out there really trying to make pockets of change in her organization, where she supported everybody on her team to think about how they could do work in a way and have time for life. I've asked Beth to talk very specifically about this one very specific moment of time when she took over a work group that was experiencing chronic overwork. And I want her to tell a story about how she helped that whole group make change. Beth, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So as you can see in the first bullet point, I was the Vehicle Safety Assurance Manager at Ford Motor Company. As an aside, I myself was working part-time and had been for 20 years, along with several of the employees, both male and female. But onto the chronic overwork issue, I took over a group that was responsible for automotive safety. So we were kind of an internal auditing group that reviewed test data and new technologies and identified potential safety issues before they became recalls or, God forbid, actual issues in the field. So we were in an interesting situation where the chronic overwork was causing a very, very low employee satisfaction numbers, and it was the employees telling the management that they were failing. So they felt a strong sense of responsibility for what they did, feeling that it was life and death, and continued to say to senior management, before I took over the team, I can't get it all done, and I'm very concerned that something bad is going to happen on my watch. So needless to say, that contributed to a lot of stress that, impacted their home lives as well as their work lives. And I was given the privilege of taking over this group and trying to turn things around. And so the main thing that we did was we set clear objectives, and I liked the term that's been used, I think, primarily by Tanya about big rocks. I asked each of the managers of my 3 departments to focus on those big rocks. And where are the areas where we might actually have a vulnerability in the system? And then we set clear objectives, and we made charts and metrics to track those objectives. We prioritized them, and then every 2 weeks, I had a detailed review with my team where we were succeeding and where we were failing. One of the things that they felt concerned about is if something bad happened, would they have management cover, or would the blame, so to speak, for some of these safety issues fall directly on them? So we were able to look at these metrics, continue to prioritize, and even share all the way to senior management at Ford Motor Company what our status was. And I think that accomplished 2 things. Number one, we were getting more done than we thought we were. And that, I think, led to a lot of comfort with the people. And then number 2, we made it clear what we weren't getting done so that people felt that they had some cover, if you will, in the event that they missed something as they went through their paperwork, or something was in the pile on their desk that they should have noted. And it was a time in the automotive world where there was a lot of criticism of the automotive companies, and there was specifically a GM engineer that was, sued in court and things like that. So it was a very stressful time for them. And I think the designing of the metrics, focusing on the big rocks, and transparency and communication about how we were doing against those metrics all the way up the chain of management made a big difference.
And thank you for that quick synopsis of something very profound, because it's, again, as listeners, if you're listening in, this is about safety. This is about lives. This was something where employees were feeling really vulnerable that a mistake they were going to make was going to be a grave mistake. And what Beth mentioned very quickly is, in the process, they got both clear about what their priorities were and focused on them, and they got clear about what they weren't able to get to. And if I remember correctly, Beth, that's where some other interesting work was done, because there were some decisions about, hey, we're not getting to this stuff. Is it important? And how do we make more resources available to get to it? Or is it not important? So there's a whole discussion about, hey, we only have so many hours in a day. What are we getting done and what are we not getting done, and what's okay about that? Am I remembering that correctly, Beth?
Absolutely are, yes. And I think there was a lot of comfort in the transparency of, here's what we're not getting done. So we're either going to need more resources, or we're going to need to take these items off of our objectives. And at the end of the day, that transparency went to senior management, and the decision was to not do those things because they didn't have a life and death impact.
Yes, yes. And I think that's the part nobody wants to talk about, which is there is only so much we can do, which means there's some things we can't do. And being able to say no to certain things or go slow to certain things, it's almost like verboten. This is not something we do in organizations. We only say, yes, we'll do more.
Right.
And I think that was something that you brought that's, I would argue, Beth, I'm making a giant leap here. I think it's because you've been someone who, all your life, who valued work and life. So you had been experiencing this your entire career, that you can't do it all.
Right.
Instead, you can do what's most important. And so the language of, hey, there's a limit. What do we do? What do we not do? That was part of your thinking and mindset for your entire career. What do you think, Beth?
No, I agree with that. I can remember saying repeatedly at the beginning when I first got there, the company has seen fit to give us 55 humans to do this job, and we are humans. We are not machines that we can turn up the dial and move faster and faster and faster. So we are going to quantify what 55 humans can do and let everybody know that.
Amen.
And so you're right, that has a lot to do with my background.
And it's a powerful, powerful way to think. Lottie, I know you're listening in and loving Beth's story. You might have a question you want to ask Beth.
Well, I just hope that Beth's experience got a prize from the company. And, I really think there should be a monthly prize for the most innovative group who is really innovative about the way they're doing their work in a way that allows them not to succumb to this overwork syndrome.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Beth, if it was recognized by the company, but I think, to spread these ideas, that's what you need. It needs recognition, a newsletter where it's all described. What did the company recognize your work, Beth?
I felt like I got, very positive feedback from my senior management. I did not get that sort of broader recognition. I think the biggest prize for me was the fact that our employee satisfaction numbers made a huge leap in the first 12 months that I was there. And that really meant the most to me, honestly. And that was 55 people who saw what we did and went on to become leaders and emulate it. So hopefully from that perspective, we did spread the message.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what a great thought, Lottie, though, that we need to have a monthly prize to people who are doing what Beth is doing. And you're 100% right, Beth. You did make a huge difference in people's immediate lives. And what we've really seen at ThirdPath is you've made a difference. People like Tanya and you and what CJ is doing, leaders who are following this path and being transparent about it, you're planting seeds into the next generation of workers that they don't have to face that crossroad that CJ is feeling of, can I go ahead, but I then have to give up on having a life. But instead, what we're saying is no. By actually supporting professionals to have a life, they become a different kind of leader. And that's a leader that's really good for organizations. So again, we're going to run out of time way too quickly this webinar. I just want to emphasize again what you just heard was a story about how a whole team can be thought about how to do this differently. You also heard some stories about some individuals who are thinking about how to do this differently. And ThirdPath has been working with not big organizations, but some small organizations where everybody's thinking about how to do this differently. And so change is happening. Well, again, Lotte, I hope what you can see is ThirdPath has put a community together that is going to keep on working on these ideas forever. And whether it takes, 7 years, 20 years, or much longer, working towards really creating whole organizations that support the dual agenda. And I hope what you can see is that, and those who are listening in today can see, this is something that men want, women want, people early in their careers want, people later in their careers want, and collectively we can make big change. So I wanted to say an extra thank you to all of our panelists today. Beth, thank you for doing that amazing job at your organization. Tanya, you just keep on doing the great job you're doing and role modeling to everybody around you. And CJ, I want to be part of your journey as you think ahead about not having to make a choice. You can keep on being the dad you want to be and the leader you want to be. Thank you, everybody. And don't forget, you can join us next month for another amazing Thursday webinar. This one will be focusing on how we can help you create more recharge time, something we all desperately need as we continue to get through this pandemic. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. What a wonderful webinar.